Good evening, everybody. Good evening. This is episode 23 of the Drew Pavlou Show. Thank you, everybody who's been tuning in every day for the past couple of weeks. This is part of a 100-day live stream challenge that I've set for myself. Leo Puglisi will be joining us in 2 to 3 minutes' time, and we will be discussing the voting trends from the Australian election. We're very lucky today to have such an illustrious guest. Keen to see Leo and Drew. Yes, thank you very much. A person says the great man. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. If you're watching on YouTube, please remember to hit like and subscribe. And please also share the stream around as well. Help us reach as many people as we can. I'm just posting the link one more time. A person says he's already subscribed. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, very lucky to have a great political forecaster and a great political analyst join us today. Good evening, 123 Max ABC says. Thank you so much for joining. Keen to hear both of your thoughts on the seat of Ryan. Well, listen, honestly, Leo knows a lot more than me about this stuff. And also, you know, he has a great career ahead of him. I'm not going to get him cancelled or anything, so I'm going to make sure that I don't say anything too silly. I am going to be going to Leo basically as a political expert when it comes to voting trends in Australia. So I see Leo has joined the backstage studio. I will add him to the stream. Good day, Leo. How are you going?
Good. No, good to be here.
No, thank you, Leo. Thank you so much for joining us. And I would encourage you to retweet as well. Help us reach as many more people as we can. I've told you as well, I'm not going to say anything that will get you cancelled. You have a great, illustrious career ahead of you. I trust you on that. Yeah, you have a great, illustrious career ahead of you, and I don't want to get you in trouble. You've taken a risk because you are a sort of impartial political forecaster and analyst, and I'm a political actor myself. So I don't want to get you in trouble. I'm going to just basically be looking today to get your thoughts on the voting trends. I'm not going to be asking you any grandstand questions or anything, to mock anybody in particular. I just want to get your actual thoughts. And I've said in my Twitter description, the one you should retweet out, Leo, that I think you will be a future Anthony Green successor. So it's great to have you on. And it's also very funny as well, because I remember in the 2022 election when we had the doomed Drew Pavlou Democratic Alliance run, you did give me the time of day, and you did actually share our after party, the miserable after party, and I appreciate the effort you go to in Australian politics. Leo,
yeah, that was a weird stream we had in 2022. People can look back at our cross to the Democratic Alliance headquarters and make of it what they will. But still up there.
It was basically the most disorganized thing in human history. It was a last-minute venue that I had booked, and they basically kicked us out 10 minutes after the broadcast. And the guy who was filming it was drunk and like falling over, and I was telling him, "Come on, just fix it up straight." And I lost my temper at him. It was very funny, actually. It was very funny. We've got a comment here. Leo, when will you host a debate between Drew and Jordan Shanks? I think that is very important, and a lot of people are asking about that.
I think if you guys can figure something out, we'll put whatever shit we want on 6 News at this point. So
very powerful, very powerful.
We've got no elections really to cover the rest of this year. So you guys, we can do it if we need to, but I'll let you worry about organization.
No, wonderful, and I think actually long term as well, we want to try organize a debate with Adu, but I'm not sure if we necessarily need you as a moderator. But I think Adu suggested it. It'd be interesting. It'd be very interesting.
I would be absolutely happy to moderate that. And I think he's
it'd be great.
So I'm very happy to.
It'd be great. Now, Leo, let's start off. What was the thing that surprised you most about the results that we saw on Saturday night? What immediately stood out to you? I mean, were you forecasting Labor victory?
I was thinking minority. I'm not the only one who thought that, so that isn't just a typical bad prediction from me. I think it was pretty reasonable based on the polls, and not just the polls. I mean, this is what I was hearing from people internally, right? I don't really think, maybe at the highest level they had some crazy internal polling, but I really don't think 99% of people in Labor thought it would be this big. I mean, it's insane. So yeah, just the scale of this Labor victory.
Yes.
You know, because even when you look at other results, like, you know, even if the Greens lose all 4 seats, and currently it's in doubt and 2 lost 2, but like you think, okay, that's 4 seats, but Labor, for them to go up to 87, potentially past that 90, I mean, as you see there's 13 whole seats in doubt. That is insane, and I am absolutely stunned by it. They've also overtaken, I think is really important to note, the coalition on primary vote nationwide. That doesn't really happen often, especially with the Greens kind of chipping away at that primary vote. That in itself is quite extraordinary. And I might add, just on that, is the fact that the Greens vote nationally, it can go down by 1%, up by 1%. It's barely changed. I think overall nationally, it hasn't changed that much. So for the Labor vote to go up the way it did, insane.
Now, we already have Labor at the 87 seats right now, even if there is not going to be any further seats added. Even if those 10 remaining in doubt seats were to somehow fall all against Labor, they've already beaten Bob Hawke's famous 1987 Australian federal election victory. So is this already basically the largest Labor victory in the history of Australian politics, at least in the modern era, since we've had 150 seats?
In the modern era, I think it would be in terms of seat numbers, at least in most people's recollection. So, you know, my lifetime, I was born just, and I mean 12 days before the 2007 Kevin 07 win, right? And everyone thinks that was the biggest thing. And so huge for Anthony Albanese there. And again, just no one has seen that coming. You know, we're not in a situation where it was, how long was Howard in for? You know, 11 years of a coalition government, right? We're talking one term. They haven't just going up after one term, huge enough, right? Going up by that much, stunning.
Oh, it really is stunning. And I read today that apparently the Liberals are threatening to sue their own internal pollster. I'm not sure the truth of that, but it seems to have blindsided everybody. And really, I actually thought myself that I thought it was going to be maybe minority government. Maybe there would be a majority government by 2 or 3 seats. I'm really shocked that it became the blowout landslide that we saw. What do you think explains it? I mean, there's a number of explanations. People talk about the Trump effect. People also point to the fact that Dutton essentially ran what was objectively a really bad political campaign. What do you think actually explains this really historic victory by Albanese?
People didn't like Dutton. I think that just says it all, right? They did not like him. They didn't like him before Trump, mind you. Even when he was in a winning position, and it's never a deciding factor in elections, and it should never be used as kind of the perfect poll at all. But preferred PM, better PM, approval ratings, Dutton was just down. I think maybe it was, might have been a news poll, but there was definitely a very late poll. Anthony Albanese was over 50% as preferred PM, I think it was, or it might have been approval, one or the other, but he was over 50% in it, right? And that's somewhat of it is a majority. They didn't like Dutton. The Trump effect, I think, added to that to some extent, although it was never explicitly campaigned on by Labor, right? I mean, they threw out lines, but they weren't the ones who were photoshopping Dutton with Trump's hair. Nor were the Greens, nor were Teals, but there were these outside groups, and they were happy for them to be there. So that's part of it. But at the end of the day, people didn't like Dutton, and Dutton's campaign was just not effective. I mean, the moment where you were having policy backflips about, especially things like the work from home, it's just like, what are you doing? And that just didn't really show the campaign going well. And clearly the mood I was constantly hearing from people within the coalition, and I'm talking from mods to Nat Right to Liberals and Nationals, it was just not a feeling of confidence for the entire 5-week official campaign period. No confidence in the slightest.
Yes. There's a lot of talk that the work from home policy that was the single most disastrous thing in that campaign. Do you think that was the single most disastrous thing in the campaign? What do you think was actually maybe the one thing that really doomed it? Or is it just it's too hard to single anything? The whole thing was too much of a dog's breakfast.
I think it's too hard to single out a single thing. I think work from home was absolutely one of the biggest. That, and also some of the stuff about public servants, not so much because of the proposal itself. I mean, it sunk them in the ACT. They were never going to get up. But I mean, Canberra Libs are a lost cause at this point. But just the fact that it was the changing of the policy, and it was the very public changing of it. And we had LNP Senator Matt Canavan, and he was great to have on the Friday, so the day before the election. And he was openly saying, this was a mistake. It was a mistake. We corrected it. And he said, that's part of the coalition's maturity. And sure, you can argue that. But, the fact that what he was conceding a mistake, and it's not all that common in an official 5-week period to hear what was arguably a signature policy, even if they didn't want it to be, it kind of became one, called a mistake very, very openly. And that was just a huge problem. It really didn't help them with things like female voters in quite a few Teal seats, because the angle that is immediately put, and you can say rightly put, is, working mothers, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, are they going to be forced to go back home because there's many people who were in public servant, etc. So it's just it's a combination of errors, right? I don't think there was a moment where it didn't seem like a shaky campaign. It was never ever smooth sailing. Not to say that other campaigns were perfect. They obviously weren't, but I just don't know what they were doing, and I don't think many in the coalition knew what they were doing either. The polling numbers very clearly reflected that trend, just constantly down.
Yeah, I mean, so this really, there's a lot of argument these days. Sometimes people will say, "Oh, well, campaigns don't matter," but really, this is like almost like proof positive that concept is wrong, right? Because back in January, it was a pretty solid lead Albanese had over. It was a pretty solid lead Dutton had over Albanese, and even in, I think was it even preferred prime minister for at least a time period, was it last year that. Dutton was less unpopular than Albanese.
You can click opinion polls just above the info box there, and you might be able to see actually the preferred PM results. But he was, if he wasn't, you've got to scroll down a fair bit. But if he wasn't ahead, he was definitely very close, right? And where was it? Yeah, you almost
we've got it. Yeah, almost had it. Hang on, Prime Minister.
Down.
Okay, preferred prime minister. This is 2013 though. Okay,
2020.
So preferred prime minister. Yeah. So, okay. So really going back a long time. Even in 2024, Dutton never really breached that, even at the height of Labor's unpopularity. So I guess you can really argue that it's Dutton's personal unpopularity.
Definitely. But even in saying that, the fact that there wasn't even an outlier poll from about mid-March of this year, not one outlier for him, is just a disaster. I get, again, that it doesn't have to be perfect. I don't think Tony Abbott's approval ratings were ever particularly, dramatically high. But at the end of the day, people have to like him at some level. And also on Tony Abbott had more time for people to know him. Tony Abbott had the 2010 campaign where he was close. He was very close. And he was able to get that. And it didn't help, of course, Labor's complete leadership shit show at the time, right? But Peter Dutton has had 3 years, and he just has never been able to make serious enough ground, even when he's had so many opportunities. Like the voice referendum. When you're sitting on referendum night, you wouldn't think, wow, now this government that backed this referendum is going to be up with 20 plus seats at the next election.
Yeah,
no one thought that, for good reason. You wouldn't think that. So it's stunning. And I agree with the comment that just came up. Yeah, when you abandon a policy, it just looks terrible. Even if people don't even care about the policy, even if it doesn't affect them. If you're changing policies mid-campaign, and also, sorry to rant, but I will just add, you have to remember, it's 2 weeks pre-poll. You have to get it in the first 3 weeks. If the first three weeks are bad, you're really kind of screwed from there. There's very limited time to make up ground with so many people voting early and voting via post.
Yes. When it comes to Peter Dutton's personal unpopularity, what do you think is the source of this? Is it this? There's a lot of talk that, he had an image as a hard man, given his time as a police officer. He was always seen as like a sort of tough politician. He had the sort of like national security portfolios, home affairs, etc. He really seemed to struggle over the past 3 years, trying to shrug off the image that he was kind of like a cruel or hard man. Do you think that is correct? And if so, what do you think is like kind of the source of that?
Well, it came from the Sydney Morning Herald today. This leaked advice from, it was Freshwater, so they were the internal pollsters. Freshwater, by all accounts, seems to have a a bit of a disaster in terms of its polling with respect to them. But the advice was, and I quote, "Convey a more relaxed and enthusing presence that signals you, Dutton, is enjoying the campaign and engaging with voters." You're having to tell him to look more relaxed and enthusiastic. It's not coming naturally. And again, I don't know the guy personally. We tried to interview him, I mean, dozens of times. We never got a single response. I'm really disappointed in that. I've never rejected, never responded, zero response at all, which is a shame. The PMO was very easy to work with, as were other campaigns and as were individuals within the coalition. But yeah.
Well, you basically, that's the strange thing. I mean, you literally interviewed the last Liberal Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. You interviewed Albanese, I think, multiple times. That is very strange that he wouldn't want to sit down for an interview with you. That is really quite strange, actually.
Now, look, I don't think I'm owed an interview or anything, but I think most in the media would like a response. And look, I'll just say that I don't think everyone in the media was particularly happy with, some of the, trying to get on media. And I also don't think he did much online media altogether, right? Albo and Labor flooded it. They flooded it with influencers and the budget lockup. He didn't. And again, I'm not saying it's a deciding factor, but also it just was a very notable difference in the campaign that they weren't doing that much online media. I didn't really see him do much except like Sam Fricker, the Divers podcast. And I'm struggling to think of anything else from there.
Yeah, I think that was basically the only podcast. And it's strange because I remember prior to the election, there was a lot of talk about, they're going to really try follow the Trump model where he sat down with a lot of podcasts. He did a lot of online media. But I'm not sure. And look, it's actually quite out of character, I think, with Dutton. If you look back at like some of the statements he was kind of famous for, that famous one on Twitter where it's like, "You dirty lefties are too easy, enjoy your weekend," sort of thing. Like he never really appeared in politics to be somebody who was unsure of himself or second guessed himself in front of the media. So it is really strange that it just kind of came out really, it seems like the past 4 or 5 weeks. What I want to get to as well, Leo, and obviously this is another really big story of the night. Why do you think there was the Greens defeat in a number of these target seats that they wanted to win, and also, the loss in seats like Griffith and stuff like that? Like, obviously, I'm somebody who's made my views very known about the Greens and stuff like that. But I don't want to have like a kind of but I don't want to have like necessarily like a polemical thing. I'm actually wondering, like, your kind of why you think, as a sort of political analyst, that there was that Greens going backwards effect. And I've seen some people say, well, it wasn't necessarily the Greens going backwards, but Labor increasing their primary vote so much that killed them. What do you think really explains this?
Look, there's a few things. I think it varies from seat to seat. I don't think it's anything like, it's not complete cope for people within the Greens to say LNP was so shit, Labor just kind of boosted from that, and we fell to third. That's correct. I mean, they would have won Griffith and Brisbane. If Labor was a few points worse than the LNP, a few points better. That's just the numbers, and that's how they really did it. Much of the case last time. That's how they're ahead in Ryan, by the way. If Labor gets ahead of them, they're done. If they don't, they beat LNP fairly comfortably, right? That's just the reality of it. But at the end of the day, I think there's a few things, and I've seen public comments. I've also seen some things I've heard internally. Some things I can be repeated, can't others yet. But look, I've seen comments, that people were bringing up things like housing. I know in Melbourne, so I'm near the seat of Melbourne, Adam Band's seat, which we're not projecting anything there yet, but I'd expect something soon. And I know people within the Greens are increasingly grim about Melbourne. But the slogan being used by the Labor candidate, Sarah Whitty, was "builder, not a blocker," right? And they're just trying to push on that. So I think that was a factor. I think there would have been some. I don't think it's a majority by any stretch, but there obviously would have been some who weren't happy over things like Gaza. That being said, a voter that they might lose over Gaza, they could gain very well back. I think that's what we've seen in Wills. Sure. Wills, they've gained 2.3%. They haven't been able to knock off Peter Khalil. Now, what I will note is Khalil hasn't declared victory, and Samantha Ratnam, the Greens candidate, is saying there are 10,000 votes still to be counted. I think that's fair. We stand by our call, but I don't think it's unreasonable there. And Look, there have also been some boundary changes. Melbourne, especially for Adam Band's seat, there was a Labor area added and a Greens area lost. That's just how redistribution happens. I guess it's unlucky for them, but it does happen. But overall, I think, just the fact that Labor was able to be the more effective anti-Dutton vote. They were able to sweep it up. And voters, maybe first-time voters, because the Greens tend to be decent with young people. The kind of just people who really didn't like Dutton, if they're seeing all these very open, specific attack ads from Labor against Dutton, then I think that it's understandable that they would go to Labor over it. So the Greens campaign, has had a few elements that have worked, some of that haven't. Look, they've had areas weren't necessarily the main targets where they've had swings and they can be able to build on them. But clearly, I think just Labor, if I had to pick one thing, I'd just say Labor was more effective at being anti-Dutton.
Yeah. Where do they have, where was there a good, I mean, if you had to single out some seats where you think they did better than expected, which seats would they be? Would that maybe be like Richmond, the seat that covers Byron Bay, etc.? Like, was there anywhere where they did actually perform unexpectedly well?
Richmond's interesting. All except the Libertarian had a vote increase in Richmond. Yeah. So the Greens did have it of 1.3% off the top of my head. They could have won it if Labor had fallen. Again, Labor didn't fall, so they don't. That's just how it works. 0.1% to candidate preferred. Labor Green swing to Labor. That's nothing at 0.1%. We're clutching straws over that either way. That's interesting. I think if we look at Fraser, would be one to look at because I couldn't. If you can bring it up, I'll be able to tell you more specific numbers.
I'm bringing up.
But you look at that. They're able to
that's interesting.
Overtake the Liberals which is really significant.
I did do a shout out to. I actually did a shout out to Huang Chong prior to the election. She's a very interesting candidate. She was very pro-Tibet. And she's very pro-Palestine, but she's also sort of like pro-South Vietnam, which is a very interesting dynamic. So she has actually.
Well, look, I'm right. I'm right near the suburb of Richmond in Melbourne, which is this huge South Vietnamese community, and the seat of Richmond is held by the Greens. So but look, Labor's won that comfortably. But interesting that number one, the Greens have gotten into that two candidate preferred, and the 6.6% swing. That's really good for them, and that's an area where they can build off. I think. She is, from what I've heard publicly and privately, a really decent campaigner, known locally, and I think unless something happens at state in 2026, she'd be the candidate again. I think it's a reasonable pick and interesting. You've got the Socialists building up a bit small there, but Fraser is a result where they want to build on. I think for next election, absolutely. I think they'd be wrong to ignore that, even if it is now a 10% margin.
Are there any key seats you think we should look at in terms of them like having really interesting results? Were there any seats in particular that surprised you? I know, for example, Goldstein, we just saw Tim Wilson declare victory, which some might see that as surprising. So from here, you don't think that Zoe Daniel can come back? Is that the case?
We've made that call. Tim Wilson publicly, kind of vaguely, he put out a thing about celebratory Yochi, but he seems to have declared victory there. She's not coming back from that. Postals have just constantly trended in his favour. It's cut that margin down, which is particularly interesting. I think I'm in Kooyong.
Kooyong's interesting.
It's slightly better for the independent. I honestly don't know, and I'm speaking to people on both sides. They don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's so ridiculously close, but also note that swing there, 4%. I don't think she's dramatically unpopular. I know she's not dramatically unpopular because if she was, it would be 50-50 right now. Darth Vader, D Vader gets 0.9 there, but Kooyong's too close to call.
Vader. David Vader. Well, that's funny.
If we just look at some of the, I know Bradfield, it's not Teal incumbent. Yeah. If we look at Rawinga.
So Bradfield, it's looking like Nicolette Boyle has lost in the seat of Bradfield.
No call, I would tip the Liberals. If we go to Warringah, so Zali Steggall's seat, look at that. I mean, that kind of swing there, it's 2% still on two-party preferred, but I mean, she just is cementing herself in there. If there was a Teal party officially, Zali Steggall would be the leader. And so New South Wales incumbent Teals, from what I've seen, have had a good result. Kate Chaney and Kurt in WA's had a good result. And interesting, can you just look at Forrest for 1 second?
Yes.
Because that'll be held by the Liberals on that count. But the Teal is coming up close. And in the count,
okay, yes.
if Green's preferences go to her, and maybe even from, Trumpets, One Nation, etc., she overtakes Liberals, and then she could actually win that. So that's one to watch. I think ABSD does a fantastic job with these results. Anthony Green does, but their computer obviously is going to make kind of vague calls. It could be overtaken in the final count. So watch Forrest.
I thought Fremantle was quite interesting because this is potentially the only seat where Labor has actually lost. Was there actually another seat where Labor potentially lost? I'm not sure.
I'll mention you the other one in just a sec, but I just will say on Forrest, Kate Hollett, she's coming off a state campaign where she almost won in the states Fremantle, right? That was in March. Even if she doesn't win, even if she doesn't win Fremantle here, she's either great chance for 2028 federal or great chance for 2029 state. That is massive for her.
A huge swing.
And I think Labor is a serious risk of losing that. Again, it's no guarantee, but that's really significant. The other one is Bean, which is in the ACT.
Bean, yes. Actually, yeah, they've lost that, I think.
Well,
no,
I'm hearing again very much different things. Labor's still somewhat confident, but that's extraordinary. No one saw this coming, right? I don't even think the Price campaign saw it coming. I was hearing virtually nothing about Bean until the morning of, and I have to note that because I was hearing so much from Bean from all different sides immediately on the morning. There was clearly a view that this was at serious risk of being lost. I mean, that is just coming out of absolutely nowhere. Now, Liberals, I believe I was told, put Price ahead of Smith. So in terms of their how to vote card. So serious chance of winning. Now, Tuggeranong, I believe would be worse for Labor. Some other areas could be better for Labor. Absolutely still close to call. Even if they don't, though, massive result.
Fowler is an interesting one. So Tu Lee has had a valiant effort, but it does seem that Dai Lee has held on. Do you think that's correct?
Dai Lee's absolutely retained that. Tu Lee would have won that if she was the candidate in 2022. I absolutely believe that. Absolutely. I mean, this is just a huge blow for Labor. Just notice, by the way, the Liberal collapse there, 5.7. Everyone else, bar them in the top, top 6 seems to be going up. So that's significant for them. And also, I think just also worth keeping a bit of an eye on, Drew, is that Dai Lee told me that, because she formed this party with Frank Carbone, who's the Mayor of Fairfield. It's called Western Sydney Community. She's registered. She didn't run under it at this election. What she told me specifically when she was making up her mind was that if she's re-elected here, they could work to build that. And so that could be really significant. There have been areas that could be really good for the taking away from Labor in Western Sydney. So, look, I think I reckon just keep an eye on what she and Frank Carbone do with Western Sydney Community. Just a recall, by the way, in terms of Vic State election. It's too close. Look, it's too close to call with anything with Vic State election. State politics is state politics. Brad Batten's in a much better position than Peter Dutton, I think, ever was. Go back to Bendigo if you can, because that is the seat held by the state premier Jacinta Allen. And you'll note the Nationals could take that. Nationals had good results across the board, by the way, in general. So I think the branding problem is really on the Liberals here, not the Nationals.
Out of interest,
across the board.
I heard that this Bendigo campaign by the Nationals was a really significant campaign. They poured like $1 million into it. Was that? I mean, do you know like what caused the Nationals to really put everything into that seat? And where did they get $1 million for that seat? Is Andrew Leithen is he like self-funding, or what's happening here?
I don't know too much about him personally. I think they just, we're seeing this as a really significant chance. The Liberal candidate, I believe he was a councillor. I think that's the right Matt Evans. There's a lot of Liberal candidates who are councillors, but I think the main goal here was very obviously to overtake the Liberals and kind of establish themselves maybe for another election if they didn't get this as the opposition, like Liberals back off our turf. This is a seat for the Nationals to gain. They've clearly showed that. Even if they don't win here, Liberals would be, I think, stupid to run again. I think the coalition agreement would technically allow it, but don't. This is a seat the Nationals could absolutely gain if they don't already. So it will be one to watch. I think Vic 2026, I mean, if it was held today, you'd probably favour Liberals maybe, but at the end of the day, it's in November 2026, right? I'll be even able to vote by then. It's ages away. No calls yet.
this is an interesting one. So Bennelong, I'm interested in your thoughts. I've read that basically 2 days out from the election, Jane Hume, the Liberal senator, had a massive disaster comment where she just essentially out of nowhere with no evidence just basically said that Chinese Australian volunteers with the Labor Party were Chinese spies or something like that. And then I then read that this was circulated really, really heavily on Chinese social media, etc. And there was a huge swing against the Liberal Party, even further against the Liberal Party in a number of these seats, like, for example, Bennelong, but also even in the seat of Menzies where Keith Woolahan lost. Do you know much about the voting trends when it comes to Chinese Australians?
Clearly, I think they've gone to Labor in recent years, and it's a bit of kind of distrust towards the Liberals at this point. Talking about things like Chinese spies, etc., aren't helping, you could say. But I think that's a really key problem there. Look, I mean, Scott Young's campaign was derailed by a number of factors. This was a seat he was a shoo-in a few months ago. It was no
right. True.
Right? He shouldn't have lost this, really.
It's how
even in a 52-48 Labor two-party preferred nationwide, he could have won this. He didn't. Huge failure. And by all accounts, it was both the local failure, but also Jerome Laxale seems to have a very strong campaign. That's obviously more than the national Labor swing. 13.6%, insane. And mind you, he's not taking from the Greens either, because Greens are up 1.1. That's a remarkable result from Jerome Laxale. A pretty extraordinary campaign.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'm just looking through some of these other seats. I mean, where else are we looking? We're looking for so Curtin. She's picked up she's actually picked up 3% of the vote there. That's looking like it's a more and more solid teal seat. Let's call this is interesting. No Liberal seats in Tasmania. Where does that come from? That's a pretty remarkable result. No Liberal seats in Tasmania.
Look, easy to do because there are only 5. One of them, Clark. So Andrew Wilkie, mandate of heaven there, like 70% or something.
He never gets out.
He's easy.
Yeah,
exactly. So Rebecca White, the Lions candidate, so she's the former state leader, I think, 3 elections in a row. Didn't get a win for Labor, but her name unbelievably out there. Obviously, also, it very much helps. The lower house boundaries are the same as the federal lower house boundaries in Tasmania, so she's representing the same area, right? So she's very well known right across all of lines. So that's been a significant player. In terms of, the Liberal campaign, I mean, Bridget Archer, there's nothing really she could do there. She can moderate as much as she wants. But the campaign it was actually really funny when I saw it. The line was, because I'm sure everyone in Australia, if you're watching it, and you, of course, Drew, would have seen the lines that were, a vote for insert local Liberal candidate or MP is a vote for Dutton,
vote for Dutton.
The ones for Bass with Bridget Archer started with sadly. So even they knew, Labor knew she was moderate, but they still got it. I think they did the same in Gilmore, by the way, with Andrew Constance. Anyway, point being, huge result. And then if we can just look at Franklin. Franklin's interesting because there's an independent there who could get up. That's in Tasmania, I think.
Okay, right.
Still will retain, but so he's really anti the salmon industry there, which has had a huge problems. Julie Collins is the fisheries minister. So he's held off the challenge, but pretty significant that he got into 2 candidate preferred on his first count. The other seat is, I shouldn't really be forgetting all Tas names, there's only 5. Bass. Braddon is the other one. So this was the other one that was gained by Labor from the Liberals there. Now, Anna Urquhart was a senator, right? She stepped down for this election. This was, I had it described to me, this was a soft retirement for Anne Urquhart. So can you tell that they weren't really thinking they were going to get in this? That's an insane swing. That is a ridiculous swing. Again, look at that Greens vote, up 1.2. It's a non-factor. She's just gaining there from 17%. The Liberals. So
you rarely see
that's. Yeah, it's stunning. It is absolutely stunning there. And that's not a margin that can be cut back easily after one term either. So the Tasmanian Liberal government, which is already a bit rocky because it's minority and they have Hare-Clark proportional and it's kind of on its legs. Let's just say if there was a total collapse in the state government, I'm not saying there will be. But if there was, there was an election held in Tasmania tomorrow, I'd put Labor as a bit more favourite.
Wow. That's incredible. This is a really interesting one, Leo, and I guess no one actually really even knows what's going to happen here because the preferences just spray in so many different directions. But Calwell and Bassem Abdo is very interesting. He's a Palestinian Australian, and I think he would be the first to ever be elected. This is a really interesting result. I mean, he's lost 14% of the vote, and the spray there is just crazy. So 12% for Carly Moore, 12% for Joseph Yohana. The Greens have gone backwards. There's another independent. I assume Sami Mosley must have been part of the sort of Gaza independent
I
campaign.
believe he was the one endorsed by Muslim Votes Matters.
Yeah. And just the spray
this
there
is insane.
Crazy.
This is insane. I still don't know. Look, end of the day, if it's that count, we all know easy Labor gain, right? But we don't even know which independent would make it. Carly Moore is favourite purely because she's the slightest ahead in terms of third place. I thought Samim Salim, was the favourite, I guess, as the independent to have the most votes. So Carly Moore kind of came in, and she's ex-Labor. And has been able to get a lot of that vote, from what I've heard, a bit of an on-the-ground campaign. End of the day, if Labor retains this, it's because there's too much opposition. But even the Citizens getting 3% in a lower house seats is just weird. You don't get that often.
I've never seen that. Yeah, I've never seen that. I mean, I've got like a long history of the Citizens Party. You never see that the LaRouche's getting that much of a preference vote. I think they I think they selected a Palestinian or a Muslim candidate there. This is really interesting.
I believe it was a Muslim candidate. Yeah, but overall, this was also an area where, and look, if I get my seats wrong, forgive me. There's 150 of them.
Yeah.
It's been a long night.
This is West Melbourne.
Yeah, I believe this was where the Greens candidate withdrew to run on the Australia's Voice ticket, so the Fatima Payman ticket in the Senate.
Yeah.
And then, but the problem was the Victorian Socialists had withdrawn because of that Greens candidate. This was an area I think the Vic Socialists wouldn't have won, but they could have gained, a few points in to kind of build up some future campaigns. I think a bit of
maybe 5-6%.
Yeah, a bit of a missed opportunity. End of the day, though, look, I think it's too split for anyone else to win. If it does, extraordinary. But I think it clearly reflects that if there was one independent opposition there in Caldwell, they could gain it. But it's just way too many.
I mean,
if you go back to Caldwell just for 1 second,
of course.
Just
that's probably the seat that do you think it'll be the last seat to be called? Maybe.
I think it could be, unless the Labor preference. Yeah, but just keep it on that. Don't expand it. I just look at that. 40.3% other, 40.3% other. That's mental. And so, we'll see that. By the way, just a comment there, skeptical Green underperformance is Liberal weakness. Again, I don't think it's not even so much just the Liberal vote going down enough. I think it's just Labor was able to be more effective at presenting itself as anti-Dutton in many regards.
Yeah.
And that's the natural kind of anti-Dutton voting coalition.
And I guess that would be similar to Canada with the NDP, where a lot of NDP voters went to the Liberals in Canada because they thought that the Liberals offered a more effective opposition. Would you say that's a similar kind of dynamic there?
Similar. I think Canada obviously has first past the post as its problem. So there is a very strategic reason they kind of have to flock to the Liberals. Look, again, the Greens, we could list on and on about problems. And I think it does vary seat by seat. Seats have been affected by redistribution. Seats have been affected by the primary vote count. Seats have also been affected by what they've been doing in Parliament, things like housing. I think some people brought up the CFMEU. Others have brought up Gaza. Again, Gaza goes one way or another for them. In some areas, it's going to be better than others. That's just how seats work.
Do you think McNamara, it damaged them? This is an interesting
McNamara's really interesting. I think, look, 2.4% isn't horrific, right? It wasn't a total collapse.
Yep.
By any stretch. I think it certainly could have played a bit of a factor, and whether that's...
It's been their top target seat, I think, for 2 elections now.
Look, it's always tough because it's a three-cornered contest, like the most three-cornered contest you could see. Josh Burdens, I think, had a really effective local campaign. Again, part of this is just the general kind of anti-Dutton vote. But the Greens, I just don't think were able to be as effective as they wanted. I think Gaza certainly could have played a factor.
But
I'm skeptical that it played an enormous factor, because if it did, I think their vote would have collapsed even more if it was a significant negative factor, as some were predicting it would be. 2.4%. It's far from good. It's not a collapse.
Yeah. No, look, it's interesting. It is one of the most. It's one of the largest Jewish communities in Australia, and maybe that might have played a part to it. I was wondering, what do you think was the most surprising result in Queensland? I mean, you were surprised by Dixon, I know. Were you surprised by how big that result was? How big the margin ultimately was for Ali France?
Absolutely, that shouldn't have been called on the night when you think of all factors. Not only is she almost close to overtaking Dutton on primary vote with a significant independent challenger as well, but 56%. The independent didn't recommend preferences one way or another, so it's kind of an organic anti-Dutton preference flow there. He was conceding 3 hours into that. You don't concede as the opposition leader on a national stage your own seat unless you're 100% confident. Gone. Stunning result. I thought it was stunning on the night. I still do. So really, that is just a total collapse for him. But you know what? I think that shows the benefit in running the same candidate. She had run 2 times before this. And look,
this was a
politics aside. If you look up the story about her son, obviously her Paralympian. I mean, it's extraordinary that she was still running in the first place after 2 previous attempts. And I think that's reflected from what I've heard within Labor.
Yeah, she lost her son very tragically, I think, in the intervening period between the last election and this election. And obviously that's such a horrible thing to happen. And that comes as well after her. She already suffered a really difficult disability. I think she was hit by a car. So she's a really incredible person. I mean, for her to come back from those personal setbacks is just absolutely incredible. Was there any particular seat? I mean, I was really surprised to see, like, for example, like Ford go, and even Leichhardt as well. I mean, that's like the first
Leichhardt. Yeah. Leichhardt's really interesting to me. Warren Inch, the long-time incumbent, he was obviously very popular. He had popularity,
and he was a mod.
Yeah, he was an interesting mod because he was the old guy mod, who was just, happy to be there. Jeremy Neal, former short-lived but former councillor, who was running only in March of last year in the Cairns local elections there. But that's swing. If you can just go to primary votes as well, but that two-party preferred 10.3, and then 10.4 on first preference is huge. It's a clear rejection of it, and again, the Greens vote only down 1.4. It's a clear direct Labor LNP swing there. And again, that's not a margin that can be easily cut down in one term if it holds at what it is, 56.8, 57%.
Yeah, like it's really incredible because what we're seeing here is the Labor Party actually pick up a seat north of the Brisbane River, because at the last election it was such a disaster. I think they were left with 4 or 5 seats, and it's been a really long time since we've seen this many seats Labor holding in Queensland. I think we haven't. I think it now surpasses potentially even the Kevin Rudd 2007 effort.
Just can I just quickly add on that? 2019 was a huge setback for obvious reasons for them in Queensland. 2022 they didn't gain a single seat in Queensland either. So for them to gain all of these from both LNP and Greens is a really huge effort from them, especially when the state election they had just lost it in October.
This is interesting. The seat of Morden, there was a really strong Greens campaign there. I'm actually surprised, to be honest, that it didn't get closer. I mean, I saw in Morden there was a huge on-the-ground campaign, and Rima Naji was herself Palestinian, and they ran on Gaza as a really top issue. I'm actually surprised that they didn't go higher, because it was a really big on-the-ground campaign there. Did you follow any of these inner-city Brisbane contests like Moreton or...
Yeah, I heard a lot about the Moreton campaign. I think, again, an election that was a bit worse for Labor. Greens could have gotten up. Greens absolutely could have made 2-party preferred. I think this is a count to candidate preferred. This is something they should again focus on in 2028, which is really, really significant for them. But I think it'd be stupid to not run the same candidate again. Greens really have to in these seats where they're getting close to overtaking or getting into that third place spot. you've kind of got to run the same people. Max Chandler Mather, by the way, he was the candidate in 2019 before he won in 2022, right? So you kind of have to stick with the same ones. Again, I would suspect they would. I think they're sticking. Mandy Nolan in Richmond, the Greens candidate there. She said I think she basically said she would if she was given the chance to run again, and I think she will in 2028. I don't think she has a reason not to. So yeah, that's really significant for them. So there've been silver linings for the Greens, which is why their national vote hasn't collapsed entirely. But at the end of the day, you have to hold your seats, and if they don't, you know, it obviously becomes a bad night for them, whether they like it or not.
We do have to go to the Green seat of Griffith, which is, and obviously, you know, I've been an outspoken critic of Max Chandler Mather. I'm not going to get you in trouble, but this is a pretty significant result. I was not expecting, to be honest, to see this much of a Labor victory, a 20% swing. And I mean, that's really a function of Labor getting into the two-party preferred, I think, because they were actually third last time around. But Renee Coffey has really built a massive margin. I mean, that's a big swing in the primary vote, 6%. And I think the fact that Max Chandler Mather actually went backwards in the primary vote, I think he would be pretty shocked by that. And honestly, I was shocked as well. I thought it would be closer than this. What do you think explains Griffith? And I'm not going to get you in trouble. Like,
you're good. First of all, I think it's not. It is misleading, the 20.6% swing, because I'm like, yes, it is, but it wasn't against Labor last time, right? End of the day, it's not a perfect comparison to use because Greens are always going to perform worse against Labor than they will against the Liberals. That's natural. Yeah. I think, look, again, housing seems to have popped up. Again, I'm literally just seeing public comments from people on the ground from the Greens. Housing seems to have popped up. Again, part of it is just the anti-Dutton factor, which has boosted Labor more. Because if it wasn't, I don't think Labor would have just gone up 2.9 to Greens down 2.9. Yeah. They've clearly gotten more than that. So I think housing has certainly been a bit of a factor there.
Because he was associated.
I don't have enough. Yeah, I don't have enough data on whether it's too much of a personal factor against Max Chandler Mather. I just don't have that data there. I think that's really significant. And look, again, it's just Labor was just far too strong in this race for them. So look, the Greens will figure it out. Again, there could be more than a few reasons for it, which will be tough. But a really solid result for Labor, considering they were only 29% in the same seat last time.
Do you think, Leo, that so we did discuss that there could be a personal factor. Do you think potentially this could represent a repudiation of the Greens moving to the left? Because I know there was obviously like a lot of conjecture. And again, I'm putting aside my personal feelings for 1 second. And I'm trying to put on the political analysis hat. Max Chandler Mather was sort of pitched as representing a shift from the Greens being a kind of traditionally more environmentalist party towards a more sort of like a party that made economic concerns right at the forefront of their platform. And it certainly moved in a more... I think Max Chandler Mather was a self-described socialist and stuff like that. Do you think this could represent a repudiation of the Greens going to the left and potentially of the fact that they were potentially seen as obstructionists to the Labor government in that first term?
I don't think it's so much just necessarily move to the left. I think the obstructionist thing exists without that. I think that perception works. Again, I'll repeat what I said before. That's what Labor campaigned on Melbourne. Their slogan was "Builder, not blocker." A builder, not a blocker, was under all these Sarah Whitty cornflutes. But look, if we're talking about things like, and it's a broader conversation, I don't necessarily think going some kind of left populist route is going to be bad for the Greens. They have to find a direction though. So a lot of this again just could come down to things like maybe we want you to work with Labor more. I've seen those comments. I support the Greens. I like the Greens, but I just want them to work with Labor more. There are so many Labor voters who you could chuck in the Greens column or you could chuck in the Labor column. I don't think there's that much of a difference. And a lot of the advanced campaigns and these other micro groups campaigns, they weren't really targeting people who had voted Greens last time, right? Talking about, legalize hard drugs, I don't think is going to dramatically swing over the Greens base, right? At the end of the day, it existed just to push against them further and maybe stop a few preference flows from LNP voters. But I don't think that was what hit its primary vote. So look, the Greens will have to find some kind of direction. It's going to end up on whether they get banked in or not. But of course, there could be moves for a leadership change anyway. But really, I don't think it is that dramatic. I don't think Palestine has collapsed their vote. It hasn't collapsed.
Yeah, no, look, I agree with you on that.
Their vote hasn't collapsed.
Yeah, I agree. It's not a collapse. It's probably more a question of lack of efficiency in the distribution of their vote.
So look at the statewide. A lot of Senate races, right? It's up in some states. And we're looking at the Senate right now. The Greens are overwhelmingly the largest bloc now.
Yes. So this is really interesting. Are there any surprises to you in the Senate elections? And obviously, I know only about half the vote has come in yet, but was there any big surprise for you?
I think just how well Labor did. The fact that they're in the race to get the third seat in so many of these contests is insane.
It's crazy.
WA, they did it in 2022. That's how Fatima Payment got in. And you think, well, surely not again. And they have got it again. The Nationals deputy leader, Perrin David, who was third on the coalition ticket in New South Wales, she's lost her seat. The Greens, again, they've held firm. One Nation's in an interesting position where they seem to have risen. They've risen off the back of Trumpeter Patriots. No one's voting for Trumpeter Patriots, right? And at the end of the day, they're getting close. I'm not so sure they'll get across the line, but preferences again will be impactful. But I think they'll likely hold that Queensland spot. Gerard Rennick's particularly interesting.
Yeah,
he had Katter on the ballot. Katter is obviously a name that people know, people associate with, and he's not an impossible chance. He's firmly outside a chance. I wouldn't put him as the favourite, but he's still in the race. And I think that's really extraordinary because his campaign, when it was first announced, People First was announced to have him on the ballot as an above the line name. It was not supposed to go. He told me this on air. It was not supposed to go national. It was not really supposed to be running all these lower house campaigns. He has. It's not done poorly. And I think, Drew, you and I are both conscious of not wanting to bring the online world into real life politics all the time, right? Because it can be very different. Yeah. But he clearly does have a lot of favorability with some on the right who are not in the coalition.
And his Facebook numbers are
talking about unity. I don't think they're going away. People First has been posting constantly about building up membership. I don't think they're going away. And I think Gerard Rennick's next move will be interesting at seat or no seat. If he knocks out One Nation, remarkable. If he does, that changes the whole conversation. Either way, he's not going anywhere, which will be interesting to follow.
His Facebook numbers are incredible. I think for a couple of years now, he's actually been in the top 5 or 6, or maybe like top 10 Australian politicians for Facebook reach and engagement.
I think Malcolm Roberts is up there with him, right? Which is why it's so close to pick at this election. But clearly Rennick's name has he was a backbench LNP senator, right? For him to build up this kind of name recognition is really significant. And again, it's a solid kind of building block. Where they don't really have many opportunities at the state level just because of timing of elections at the moment. But it's really one to watch. I don't think he's going away after this result at all.
Yeah, it's interesting when it comes to Rennick. I actually think it's the first time in a long time I've seen a real actual grassroots campaign on the hard right. Because if you look at Pauline, I mean, she consistently gets about 6 to 10% of the vote in Queensland and stuff, but she basically never ever seems to have volunteers. And they never really seem to be at the booths. And it's really the same when it comes to Trumpeter Patriots. I think Rennick was actually the first kind of organic sort of hard right campaign I've seen in a long time, especially in Queensland.
Yeah, Trumpets is kind of the opposite of that in terms of billboards and very limited on the ground presence. Rennick's campaign, again, it's when you bring in that populist messaging, and it's like the fact that, look, again, it's not real life, but when you get off Twitter, you get more interesting views. When I'm seeing comments that are like, Rennick, you and Pingers, they're the only honest politicians in Australia, or I've seen things like vote Rennick and Greens. I mean, again, median voter, but the fact is he's been able
to. That is an
appeal
interesting
to them.
thing.
That's really significant. he hasn't appeared as quote unquote, racist far right to a kind of significant enough base. Again, I'm not accusing anything
No, I think
that
you're
for
right
One
there.
Nation, but they face that kind of thing. With that said, One Nation is obviously still the most dominant by far, and they're in a position right now where they would hope to build. But really, One Nation's strength and kind of credibility as the party for the non-coalition right is dependent on whether they sneak up in some of these races. I thought they'd be doing a lot better in SA, but the Malinowskis factor there is the new McGowan factor, which, by the way, I'll just throw this out there. Keep an eye on the state election in South Australia in March next year. That could be a real blowout against the Liberals.
Right. Okay. Wow. I mean, okay, this is an interesting thing, right? We've got one comment here. Check the Queensland Senate with Belinda Jones. I mean, were you surprised that the legalized cannabis vote went backwards? Because I mean, they did really well last time. And it is like
it's the only state where they've gone backwards the last time I checked.
Right. Okay.
I don't know whether they just flock into Rennick. I mean, look, I can't pick legalized cannabis voters at the end of the day. So I'm not so sure. I don't think it's anything to do with the lead candidate. I think it's rarely to do with the lead.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's from Belinda Jones. It could even just could be their position on the ballot paper.
That too. I think Rennick had a good position actually, if I remember. But again, he had the Catter name. What I will also just quickly add is that legalized cannabis not out of the race in WA. In fact, it's their best result in terms of, I think, like having a chance. So keep an eye on WA. And also, I reached out to Fiona Patton, the legalized cannabis candidate in the Vic Senate, who said still in a chance, waiting for results. So they're not conceding there. That's not unreasonable. I think she's an outside chance. But yeah, watch for legalized cannabis in WA. They're confident that they can kind of sweep up the remaining minor party votes, overtake One Nation, and get into that spot. And assume Labor doesn't have enough to pick up a third. I think that is their best shot, maybe their only shot remaining.
I mean, that's a really high quota for Labor, 2.45. That's really, I mean,
look at the Liberal vote, though. Look at the Liberal vote, down 6.4. That's insane.
That's crazy. I mean, since the era of the Greens solidifying themselves as like a kind of third force, this is like the largest Labor Senate victory in a long, long time. I want to ask you about this. And again, this is somebody like Maxine Lemayne, where like, I have been a very high profile online critic and everything. So I'm not going to try to get into like,
I can guess who you're going to say, but go on.
Yeah. So look, I think it's pretty significant that Fatima Payman in Western Australia, she's behind Gerard Rennick. She's behind the Australian Christians. She's behind a lot of really small parties. I mean, how far do we have to go down? Oh, sorry. So she's behind the Great Australia Party, and like they are a really small micro party. Were you surprised by the vote that Fatima Payman received? Did you think she would do slightly better? Do you think there's any chance for her to come back at the next election? Because she's got 3 years left on her Senate term.
3 years is a long time in politics.
Yeah,
I don't think she's the favourite, or I don't think any defector from a major party is ever a favourite to be re-elected in the Senate.
Yeah.
Just like as a blanket rule. Anyway, I'm going to be honest. I thought that they actually did slightly better than I thought. I was thinking under 0.5. Now, I'm not saying it's a particularly ginormous result, but I don't think they're wanting to go away. I don't think Fatima Payman wants to go away. She's very clearly outspoken, whether you like her or not. One thing that I think did hurt them, they didn't run a single lower house candidate. They said they would, right, when she announced this.
Yeah.
And so that's a seat where, look, to use an example, Caldwell. Imagine if they were running in Caldwell or something.
Oh, yeah, I know.
To have
that's true.
A strong campaign there. They didn't.
I'm surprised by that.
Look, yeah, again, I don't know if there's room for Australia's voice with 6 Senate seats up for grabs. Maybe they have a shot at different elections. She's clearly the most established in WA, and there isn't a WA state election till 2029. But, I mean, look, it's not... Look, it could be a hell of a lot worse for them. It's nowhere special. Interesting they've done better than... Just sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, interesting they've done better in a lot of counts than the Libertarians, who have completely
That's
flopped.
fair. That is, look, that's a fair point. I was going to say, I was surprised that they got as little as they did in New South Wales, because I thought there is obviously like a large Western Sydney Muslim population. She was really targeting that sort of community. She was out there campaigning. I thought like, to be honest, I thought she could crack up 1% in New South Wales. I'm actually surprised she didn't. I mean, she's 0.7%.
I think there's, look, if they had some candidates in those Western Sydney seats, sure. But if they're not, if they're spread out statewide, there's nothing they can really do there, which was a big problem. Again, they only had they were formed in October. So I think it's a watch this space. I don't think they're going to collapse after this election.
Yeah,
Again,
no,
I don't think Fatima Payman's a favourite to be re-elected in 2028 by any stretch. But
and it is different when it's it is different as well when their name is on the ballot, because like you see that with Pauline Hanson, like when Pauline Hanson is on the ballot versus Malcolm Roberts, for example, like Pauline Hanson does a lot better than Malcolm Roberts when, you know, in Queensland, when it's up for those elections where she's not actually directly on the ballot.
And a lot of their candidates weren't particularly known with respect to them. Megan Cracker was probably the most known of them all, who was running in WA. But that's just kind of the reality of it.
Interestingly, she's at 0.8% in South Australia, which is higher than her Western Australia. Do you know where she actually did best?
Good question.
I mean, she's at 0.8% in Queensland.
I haven't seen him bigger than 0.8. I mean, you can click around. I haven't seen him bigger than that.
Yeah.
There we go.
She's at 1% in Victoria. Okay, interesting. She's at 1%.
And again, note the candidate. I believe he was the one who quit the Greens for this, Mohammed El Masri. So that's an interesting factor.
Also, I will say, even though I've been a big critic of her, to defeat the Libertarians in Victoria is actually pretty significant.
Yeah. I don't know why, by the way, the ABC is saying, I think they said like plus 0. I don't think they've got the swings right there. But yeah, if we can just go over that, because you and I both see them a lot on social media. Yeah,
they're big on social media.
Clearly, they were hoping for a strong campaign. And if we look at their vote here, New South Wales, 2.1%. Yeah, so New South Wales, this was a joint ticket with Rennick People First and the Heart Party. Craig Kelly was the lead candidate there. Yeah. No change, really. I think they were at 2.1% last time. It's virtually no change. You would think they'd do a bit better. They have different branding in New South Wales for whatever reason. In Victoria, they're down 1.7. In Queensland, down 2. In WA, down 1.2. In SA, down 1.2. In Tas, down 1.4. In the ACT, they didn't run last time. They were with a joint coalition with the Heart Party, 1.3. In the NT, they're down 7.7. However, that time, Sam McMahon was their candidate, who was a CLP incumbent senator who defected. But look, this was their first federal election, excluding a by-election or two, with the Libertarian name. They have gotten nowhere close to where they've wanted to be. So a lot of questions that will be raised there. And maybe a bit of concern, but at the end of the day, it's their first time with this name, and it's their first time with the new kind of burgundy libertarian branding.
When it comes to these minor parties,
call it a flop.
When it comes to these more micro parties, like the ones around 1% and stuff like that, was there anyone that you thought really like outdid themselves, that like surprisingly did really well, or anybody that really performed below expectations? I mean, we just did talk about libertarians. Does anything really stand out to you when it comes to those more like the micro party type situation?
Yeah, look, Rennick, in terms of Rennick himself in Queensland, outperformed my expectations. Until recently, I had heard he had a really solid ground game. That's clearly reflected there. Yeah. I thought like when he first ran, I'd be thinking like under 1%, but all credit to him. He's had a strong campaign there. Trumpets have flopped as kind of expected. I think I know you've had one or two run-ins with him. I think the Victorian Social will be satisfied.
They have actually done better.
The result they got. They've more than doubled their vote.
No, that's true. I was going to say, even though I've been
satisfied with that.
I was going to say, even though I've clowned on, even though I've had like, you know, lots of run-ins with Jordan Vanderland, like they actually have done like putting on my sort of objective political analysis hat, like they have actually done objectively pretty good to get 1.8%.
Yeah, and look, there's a state election, as we said, in Victoria next year. There's upper house, local regions, Northern Metro, Western Metro. If you watch this space.
You know, like they're only about 13,000 votes behind Trump and a Patriot, who spent like millions of dollars. That is actually
they're even with Family First candidate. Family First was running, by the way, like almost everywhere. But also Family First candidate was Bernie Finn, a former and long-time ex-Liberal to DLP MP there. The fact that they're even with him is significant. The AJP also does, Animal Justice does very well in Vic, I think, compared to some other states. True. So they've beaten them by 0.3. That's significant. So look, they'll take that result.
That is actually pretty good. Do you think Michelle Ananda-Rajah gets that third seat, that last seat, the 6th seat?
I would put her as favourite because of the collapse in the, look at that, 2.46 down, collapse in the coalition vote. I think she's in it versus Warren Pickering of One Nation. Fiona Patten legalized cannabis is a very, very outside chance. But Anada Raj is the favorite, and that's insane if she gets in. I mean, she was there. Yeah. I don't think many people thought she would get back.
And she got redistributed
That's completely reasonable because she was third on the ticket. Yeah, because she lost her seat. Huge result if she gets in for a 6-year term. Massive
honestly,
result there.
Honestly, good on the Labor Party for at least putting her on the ticket, right? Because it's pretty brutal when you get redistributed out of your seat. That's almost like the most brutal thing in politics. Tasmania is a good one to discuss. There is actually a really big battle right now between Jackie Lambie and Pauline, probably for that last seat. Do you think Jackie Lambie gets up?
Well, I wouldn't say it's between Lambie and One Nation. It's between Lambie and Labor. Look at the Labor quota, 2.5.
Yeah, good point. Good point, actually.
Labor gets a third. Wow. That takes the spot. The fact that fifth, by the way, there, Richard Colbeck, an incumbent senator, the fact he isn't even likely on that count, he's just ahead. Look at that again. 8.95% down in Tasmania.
Wow.
Stunning collapse there.
Wow.
So Lambie, I think, is still favourite. Yeah, look at that. Lambie, I think, is still favourite. One Nation is kind of coming up, and they'll need a bit of a preference flow that boosts them. Lee Hansen was the candidate there. One Nation was very much trying. You had Pauline Hanson in Tasmania on election day.
Because it's her daughter running.
How much they were trying. Yeah, exactly. Which shows how much they were trying for Lee Hansen. I think, it's between One Nation and Lambie for that sixth spot, to be honest. One Nation, excuse me, it's between Labor and Lambie for that sixth spot. One Nation is a bit of an outside chance. Not as outside as Fiona Patten, but really, Lambie's vote not good. I was hearing that there was maybe a bit of shaky concerns there.
It's sad.
Look, that's a situation where in 6 years, she might not be able to run, and with kind of she lost their shine. Mind you, she was elected in 2013. I think we forget that with the Palmer United ticket. She was elected a while back.
And she made her own brand. It is interesting. I mean, I think it would be really brutal if she does lose, because I've seen the polling that says that she's actually the most popular politician in Australia. And she actually did surprisingly well in like places like Queensland. I think she got like 1.5%, which is like really interesting considering I don't think she even set foot in Queensland.
They were also trying can you just go quickly, New South Wales, they were trying there quite a bit.
0.9%. I mean, that's still better than expected.
If you can go to SA, Rex Patrick, the former senator, was their candidate there.
Actually, I didn't look at that. Let me see. Actually, 2.6%. That's pretty respectable.
That's clearly their best outside of Tas. I would say that's really a Rex Patrick vote.
I mean, good on him. Good on him. I mean,
I think the Centre Alliance Xenophon remnants is fading, and it's fading fast, except for Rebecca Sharkey in Mayo. But look, Lambie, look, they changed their logo. They tried to go national. They did it. They tried in 2016, and they went nowhere. Even though it was a double dissolution. I don't think Lambie will ever be able to go national. I just don't think she can crack it. And maybe this was a problem for her. Maybe they didn't spend enough time in Tasmania and kind of built up, because 1.5%. Is not insignificant against her. Again, I still think she's a favourite to win, but I just don't think the Lambie name works well at a state level. And also, with respect, I'm not sure how much it works outside of Lambie herself, because look at the state MP, 2 went after a few weeks at the state election. True. It doesn't work.
I actually feel bad for her, because I have seen that polling that said she's the most popular in Australia. I mean, I assume her team would have seen that and thought, we have to give this a shot. And, if I was in Lambie's position, I probably would have thought the same thing, but it's pretty brutal.
Well, I could have sworn, I'm going off memory, but I could have sworn that when Rex Patrick announced his candidacy, maybe he said it or someone else said there was internal polling suggesting they could have gotten up in SA Senate. First of all, internal polling. I never saw it. I don't think anyone's seen it. I'd love to see it. If someone can, leak it to me, please. But I just don't see it. It's a nice idea, but at the end of the day, people are seeing the Lambie name. They're not seeing the Rex Patrick name.
That is brutal.
So she's got to focus on her own seat at the moment. But look, if she gets in, that's 6 whole years.
This is a good question, Leo. What do you think happens to One Nation post Pauline Hanson? Because she is getting older. I can't see it going for much longer. Palmer has said that he's not going to potentially run again. And we know that the recent electoral financial reforms mean that he can't do that $100 million spend that he has been doing. So what do you think the future is for that sort of hard right, the far right type vote? Because it's so splintered. And Pauline won't be there forever. I mean, she's tried to sort of set up successors to her. She tried to have James Ashby. He was defeated in the state election. She's tried to have her daughter run in Tasmania. A lot of people thought maybe that would mean she's setting her up as successor. I don't know if that's actually possible to, for the Pauline Hanson name to succeed with her daughter. And then, Palmer now basically saying he's not sure about the next election. So what do you think the future is for that sort of hard right vote? I mean, right now, the only one that we've both said is doing well is Rennick.
It's a good question. And look, 3 years will be a long time. Rennick is in a good position at the moment. At the end of the day, though, One Nation is the most well-known. Pauline Hanson is the most well-known if we're talking about these politicians on the right. And look, if she wants to run again in 2028, she's got a very good chance of re-election. Again,
she'll win probably.
I'd say she wins, yeah. So it's at the end of the day, it's her call. But there has to be some kind of talk here. And the amount of right-wing minor parties that keep popping up. I don't know if you've gotten Twitter ads for it. There's one called the Nationalist Australia Party that's come up now that's running ads and tweeting. And it's like
there's so many different ones.
It's like how many can you possibly run? It's getting ridiculous. Look at the UK, by the way. Because look at the UK, because there's a bunch. There's obviously Reform is kind of the main one. And I get different circumstances extremely, but look, you always have these other English Democrats, British Democrats, Homeland, etc., and all these other ones, the Reclaim Party, the Bruv Party, the Integrity Party, they all pop up. At the end of the day, though, Reform has a very, like him or not, well-known figurehead, someone who can lead it, someone who clearly is boosting their numbers, and they're in a position where saying PM Nigel Farage is not a joke anymore, right?
Of course.
It's insane what they're doing over there. They've consolidated behind it, and they've also been able to appeal broadly. They've done this kind of populist thing. Whether Rennick can do that, I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, it is the Hanson name and the Hanson brand that has the numbers. It is the Hanson party that is registered right across the nation. They are in the best position at the moment, even with all their internal, the MPs quitting over the years. They still have that state registration. That's important. I don't think anything other than amalgamation would work for the eventual kind of Hanson successor, whenever that is. But we don't even know if it'll be in place by 2028. 3 years, it's a long time, but also it's not.
Do you think there is any chance for a Reform-like phenomenon in Australia whereby the Liberal Party is potentially supplanted to their right?
It's a good question. I think that a lot of this will depend on what the Liberals do with their leadership. And mind you, the fact that you've already had wide talk about this Liberal leader is going to be a placeholder is probably not a good sign in terms of that the Liberals have a strong situation in their ranks at the moment.
Is that why Hastie didn't run? Because it's kind of assumed that whoever takes that position is a poison chalice they won't.
I suspect so. I don't know factually. I can guess. I think, look, One Nation has never tried to form government. They run in all these seats, they aren't trying. They don't even pretend to. They don't do what trumpets and the UAP have next prime minister. Like them or not, they're not stupid about expectations. Okay. From all I speak to internally, really, they have to find someone with some kind of ambition. This is, I think, a moment. I'm not saying it's the perfect moment, but it's a moment where someone can try to sweep away from the Libs here. It's going to be tough, but they're in a position to do that right now. And whether they can try it in these outer suburban areas, regions seem pretty locked up by the Nats. But even metro seats that are swing seats, the Liberal brand is in a bit of strife at the moment. Really, it's tough. It's very tough in only 3 years. What I would say just very quickly, Drew, I know quickly, is that look at the local level. Reform runs at the local level a lot.
Good point.
They build up. One Nation has never tried at the council election. I'm not saying it's perfect, but run as many campaigns, get your name out there. I think that helps.
That's so true. No, that is actually really, really true. I mean, and I think that's the biggest problem with Pauline. I mean, there's literally no grassroots with that party at all. There's no grassroots. There's no party membership. There's no internal debate. Like, it literally doesn't exist. We've got a comment here saying Kevin Bonham has called Melbourne for Labor. I'm not sure if you've seen that.
I have. Look, Kevin does a great job. I respect his calls. We're just going to remain a tiny bit cautious at the moment. My personal suspicion is the Labor will come out on top. I wouldn't say it's too long before a call. But watch this space. Again, the mood within people I speak to in the Greens has gotten a lot more grim. Labor people are confident but not claiming anything, certainly. Watch this space, though. I respect and expect Kevin's calls to come out pretty accurate, though. And I know he doesn't. He said himself in that tweet, by the way, he doesn't make calls outside Tasmania often. So I guess
true.
He's coming in defiant there. And again, I suspect he'll be right. We'll wait for a call, but I don't think it'll take too long.
I do really actually like his political analysis. I was going to say to you, where do the Liberals go from here? Because they're bleeding to their left and their right. They've got the Teals on their left flank and they've got these right-wing minor parties on the right flank. They really seem to just be sort of like torn and really in a difficult place. I mean, we've got Rowan Dean and some people on the right wing who are saying, well, the reason why Dutton lost is because he was too left-wing. I don't think that is credible at all. Some people are saying, oh, if only he had embraced Trump, he would have won. I think that is absolutely not credible. Do you think, Leo, what do you think the future for this party is? I mean, we don't know whether they're going to try go to the left. We don't know whether they're going to try double down on the right. But they do seem to be really, really in a struggling position.
Yeah, it's interesting. Look, the Liberals, they're going to get a lot of advice over the next few days and weeks. A lot of it's going to be shit, right? This happened last time. I don't think going insanely pro-Trump is going to work. Like, I know people if people talk about Dutton should stand behind his convictions more, okay, that's one thing. But look at Trumpet of Patriots. Look at all of this. I don't think it works here. I don't think it works in Canada.
Yeah.
I don't, and
here's the thing, right? Like,
I just don't think it works.
As you said, there was a party in this election that spent like $60 million and they explicitly said we're the Trump party and they got 2% of the vote. So I just can't see how going to the right would help them. But they're in a
try things about Trump. Try things like going into online media. Try all this thing. Try voter outreach. Again, different systems, different circumstances. But don't do a policy that you can be very easily tied to by opposition campaigns. That's not a good idea. Also, by the way, just on that comment, I also did say, Hasty was avoiding the Liberal logo and replacing it with the Australian flag. So,
and he was one of the only ones who had a swing to him.
And of course, he's in WA, where the Liberal vote and brand is in probably the worst situation in its history right now.
Yeah, wow. This is maybe this could be a final question, Leo, because I'm very conscious of the fact that you've stayed for a long time and it's been a great chat. We could, if there's anything you wanted to, if you think there's anything we've missed, I'd love to get your thoughts. But then if not, I'll go to a final question for you.
I think I've about covered it. So go ahead.
No, thank you so much, Leo. It's actually been a really interesting conversation. I love this sort of like getting into the weeds stuff. I mean, it really is actually interesting. I was going to say, okay, this is obviously, I mean, it's almost stupid to ask this question because as you've said, 3 years is a long time. And it's like, you can't predict an election like 2 days after the last election, right? But this majority that Albanese has now built up is so significant that it seems like it would be really difficult for any party to come back at the next election and break that majority. Do you think it's possible in one term for an opposition to have, that type of effect where, because they're going to have to swing like 30 seats, right? It's a really tough one.
It's possible. But I'm almost thinking of like 2013 to 16 coalition. Turnbull in 2016, he held on even when there was swings against. At the end of the day, Labor has built up a fortress in many seats. They are dealing with an opposition where the narrative is who wants to take this and nobody does, right? I don't think Angus Taylor or Susan Ley or Dan Tehan is going to be Prime Minister. I'm not sure they'll even be the leader by 2028, right? No one wants it right now. So that it's tough. They're clearly the best placed position. And before we get into specifics about minority or majority, yes, you would tip Labor for the next election immediately. I think it's rare that soon after election you wouldn't tip the one who just won anyway. So they're very clearly in the best placed position. But as a Labor source told me on election night, voters have given them this chance. They absolutely have to use it. And if they do it well, they'll go up. If they do whatever the hell Starmer's doing right now, don't do that. Actually, Labor should not do that if they want to stay in.
Actually, like just before we go, can we quickly, really briefly talk about Keir Starmer? And that is probably like, that would be the worst case scenario for Labor, right? Because they've won this huge majority. And Keir Starmer won a huge majority. Like Keir Starmer's majority, it was a huge margin in terms of actual seats, but in terms of the popular vote, I mean, and I don't think this is correct. I mean, at the end of the day, Labor has got about 35% of the popular vote. I think Keir Starmer won that huge majority in the British election with comparatively not too high of a primary vote.
32%, same as Labor got in 2022, right?
Yeah,
32%. By the way, any idiots at home who talk about first past the post will stop governments getting in with 32%. No, it does not. No, it won't. But go on.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. So it's 33.7%, and with that primary vote, which is actually at the end of the day a really low primary vote, in historical terms, he won 411 seats, which was like a veritable landslide. You could potentially see a scenario. I mean, it's a little bit different because I think Labor's primary vote in this election has increased so significantly, and it's done so as well at the expense of the Greens. And we haven't seen that in a long time. You know, in this new era where the Greens have been a really major force in Australian politics, we haven't seen the Labor Party's primary vote go up this much. But I guess the worst case scenario would potentially be, you know, like Keir Starmer, you have a massive margin in the actual House, but the vote underneath that evaporates and erodes. And I wonder, what do you think is causing that massive erosion that we're seeing in Britain right now? Because I think, as we saw when we saw the other day with the local council elections, if that were to be replicated at a national level, Reform would be the next government and Nigel Farage would be the next prime minister, which would be stunning.
It is stunning. 5 years is a long time in politics over there.
Yeah,
I just don't think they know what to do with it. They just don't know what to do with it. And look, I'm not going to try and be a UK expert, but the things I keep hearing most are like winter fuel allowance and things like that. It's like it's working class areas where Reform's able to get up. It's these Labor heartland. The by-election, I believe, was like a top, the one that they won, the parliamentary one, was like top 15 safest seats in the country, right? And the Labor MP who punched someone. Yeah, that's bad enough, but they still should win that. They shouldn't lose by 6 votes to Reform. I just don't think they know what to do with it. I don't know if Keir Starmer, he's just so like, you know, people are like, oh, he's talking about minor tax changes. And it's like, you have like 400 seats, do something, right?
Yeah, no, it is really strange.
I don't know what they're doing.
And I don't want to get you in trouble or anything. And obviously it's a controversial point, but the thing I think that I keep on seeing when it comes to Britain is like, especially when it comes to working class voters, is migration. And I think that's something, and it's interesting because Keir Starmer it seems that Keir Starmer has made moves towards triangulating on that issue. I mean, he gave a really big monumental speech where he basically said, you know, the Tories made migration too high. They had a sort of post-nationalist ideology. We want to go away from that. But again, I just think they're just floundering. Like, I mean, they're just really sort of like, they're in deep water. They don't really know what to do with their majority.
I just don't think people also believe them on the migration thing because they're doing it after they're being hit by Reform on it.
Exactly.
And look, the harder Reform goes on it, without going, I think maybe it was like a UKIP candidate or something. Maybe it was a Reform candidate. I don't know. But like one candidate, was saying, why don't we just, have guns pointed at them off the channels or something like that? And those are the kind of things that'll get you the controversy that people
I remember seeing that.
But if you just talk about, we should deport them, and they talk about criminals, and they do all this, that isn't going to get you in enough trouble. And so they're able to kind of hit it there. Again, as we both know, UK has different circumstances in terms of where migration is, in terms of different areas, in terms of the importance of local government there compared to here. But at the end of the day, Reform is able to continue to build and get up. And really, Labor just, again, does not seem to know what to do with this majority. So you'd hope that Labor here has a plan if they want to stay in. Of course, they will have the one extra benefit or downside of the Senate. They are going to have to pass things. Ideally, for them, it would be a simple Labor plus Greens gets a majority.
Yeah.
It might not end up that way, so it's relying on Pocock, I think, is more of a stable vote. There's also Thorpe, there's Lambie, there's Payman, and then, of course, there's the coalition. So they're in a better position there. I don't think they're in a horrific kind of negotiating position there, but they were able to push on this and say, we have a mandate now. because they haven't, seats-wise, they have not scraped through at all. And they are also winning a few seats off primary vote, as in like 50% plus primary vote. So they can talk about mandate and not get laughed at a bit more. And also I keep saying it also, again, ahead of the coalition's national primary vote, insane.
Yeah, that's stunning. It is really stunning. Last question. I just thought of this one. I'm sorry. I don't want to keep you too long, but
you're good.
Imagine 3 years time, right? You're covering the election results, and Albanese has lost the majority government, and it's going to be, there will be a new government formed. What do you think happens in the next 3 years that could actually see that happening? Obviously, this is, an out there scenario, but if there were to be in 3 years' time a change in government from this massive position, what do you think would have happened? What do you think it would require?
A combination of maybe a few things. Labor infighting. I'm reminded of Rudd Gillard Rudd. Coalition being able to effectively message, which is a big if right now. That seems like a given, but evidently it wasn't. The Greens, I think, getting themselves together in a few seats, which are marginal for Labor right now in a Greens-Labor contest, and Labor not doing anything with their majority. That gets them up.
Personally, I think maybe the biggest risk would be an economic crisis of some sort. And there are some pretty bad signs in the Australian economy with, just the housing bubble being so bad and stuff like that. I hope that they will be able, I think for all our sakes, we hope that we won't see a crisis as a nation.
Yeah, please. Again, I don't want to the renting and housing market in like 6 months and have to worry about that. We all want the economy to do. What I would say is, again, look, it could get a lot worse, and maybe it will get a lot worse. We obviously hope it doesn't, but cost of living was the issue at this election. And even then, the coalition hasn't made any inroads on it. They have not made inroads on it.
That's what's shocking to me, right? Because
the Labor plan, Labor just kept kind of demolishing that kind of plan. Things like the coalition's, 12-year, fuel cut. Again, they campaign on that like a lot. I mean, the amount of how many times was Peter Dutton at a petrol station during this campaign?
20 times.
It only works so much, and also that kind of thing I don't think gets young voters on side. There's going to be more young voters at the next election, even more than this time when millennials and Gen Z outnumbered baby boomers, right? The late Gen Z, people like me, are going to be able to vote for the first time. A lot of young people, they aren't regular car drivers. They're in the city. They use public transport. They want better transport. They're in outer suburbs. They're catching the train every day.
The Gunzels, Revenge of the Gunzels.
Constantly Gunzels, exactly. But constantly talking about fuel constantly, I mean a ridiculous amount, won't help.
No, look, that's interesting. We've got a comment from Barclay again. Great work, Leo and Drew. Good to see two aspiring cephalogists bursting onto the scene. Well, thank you, Barclay. Very, very good.
Thank you, Barclay.
No, look, that was actually a great conversation. Thank you so much, Leo. I really appreciate how much time you gave us, and it was really interesting just discussing the actual weeds of the election and where the votes were breaking down. Thank you so much. It was a really good conversation, and I hope that at the next election, maybe you can replace Anthony Green on his contract.
I could never replace Anthony Green, but always happy to chat and happy to chat again in the future, and hope we can get some debates with you and some others going on 6 News as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, Leo. All the best, and keep up the great work you're doing. Thank you, mate.
Thank you, Drew.
Thank you so much, mate. Cool. Guys, I might let me know. I mean, I think we've got 30 people watching. I might stay for a couple more minutes if anyone has some questions. Have loved listening to this, lads. It's Max from Current Affairs Club here. Hopefully, new media like you are a bigger force to cover the next one. Thank you, mate. Thanks so much, Max. That's really kind of you, mate. It was a really good conversation. I really enjoyed talking to Leo. He really does know his stuff. All credit to him. I think he's just turned 18. It's pretty amazing. What he's been able to achieve as a sort of journalist and a political analyst at that age. It's incredible. And I always love just talking to people who are obsessively interested in politics, just like I am. So, and he knows his stuff. So I really, really appreciated that great chat. And I think he's a legend, Leo. He's always been nice to me, and he's always respectful to everybody across the political spectrum. He'll talk to people from the far left to the far right. I mean, it's actually pretty incredible what Leo is able to do as a journalist. Hey, Drew, I go to Griffith University. Am I permanently fucked for life and will I end up in poverty until I die on the street? No, mate, you're going to be fine. Griffith is fine. I've got lots of friends who go to Griffith University. Con says, good work, Leo and Drew. Thank you so much. Take a look at Bullwinkle. I mean, I think I just did look at Bullwinkle, and at this point in time, I'll bring that up maybe as our last bit of analysis for the night. If you guys have any further questions, please just chuck them in and hit like and stuff like that. I appreciate the comments. There was a lot of silliness in the comments today, but I appreciate people who've been watching and adding their thoughts. I will try get up Bull. I think we've got Bullwinkle now, so it's a very close contest. Interesting. It'll be really interesting. Trish Cook leads by 50 votes, 80% counted. So, I mean, total votes 97,000. I guess there's probably 10,000 votes still to be counted. So there's a lot to be counted there. We probably don't know necessarily what's going to happen there. Would you play a video game on the 2025 Australian election? I don't know what you're talking about, mate. Have you seen that Branton guy seething on Twitter? Okay, let me find it. Brantus Braden. Really, that's pretty funny. I know he's had a go at me a couple times. I'm gonna try. Hang on. Let me get this up, guys. Let me get up Brantus Braden. How do I spell it? Bantist. Bantist. Braden. Okay. I think he's got me blocked, but I can still look at them. Okay, let's see. So he's talking about Elbow. What a soulless, wretched man. The hottest place in hell is reserved for... Why does he hate him so much? Well, I mean, I don't even like Elbow that much, but like, he's like a pretty bland person. Like, how the hell do you like so have this passionate hatred for him? I mean, even people that dislike Elbow, like, I feel like he's kind of a bland figure. It's just interesting. I don't know why there's so much hatred. It was legendary. Yeah, when EJ, that's so funny. You needed more flags in the bio. All said. What else has he commented? Is it just that? Let's see. Does he have any other replies? Green Ellie France. You'd think with the amount of involvement of Abby in the Greens campaign that she's actually running, it would be like having Friendly Julies being actively involved in the Labor campaign. Like a full third of women under 35 follow Abby Chatfield. I think it's slightly different. Is that even true? Is that true that literally a third of women under the age of 35 followed Abby Chatfield? The person who's famous for telling an astrophysicist that she's a Gemini is your spokesperson is quite embarrassing. They jumped the shark with the Brat DJ parties, but before that, I think it was going well. The Brat DJ parties did not go well, guys. Did they look good? They didn't do well. I'm not going to comment on them electorally, but I had a blast. They looked fun as shit. Next time we'll do them with Kneecap and win 12. If you did that with Kneecap, you would be absolutely crushed. My take, I voted for Labor, but it was a vote against the Greens and Wills, then for Labor, least worst option. Not fair enough. And I voted for Labor, but I put Greens last on my ballot paper. Drew, why do you want Asiatic indentures enter into industrial competition with Australian workmen? Like, what the fuck are you even talking about, Ibrahim? Yeah, a lot of young women follow Abby. Is it, how many people? I mean, so he said a third of young women under the age of 35 follow her. Is that a true stat? You'll never guess the evil, terrible thing Albo did to deserve this condemnation. Celebrating the defeat of one of the only people in Parliament that cared about renters while condemning the working class to hopelessness and housing stress, advocating responsibility to girls in the private sector. Like, what the... Maxine Mather held up blocked housing reform. His policy was explicitly to make housing worse. You're watching me craft a tweet live, guys. The artist at work. Please, guys, you have to appreciate this. This is the artist at work. But yeah, like, guys, this is literally what I'm saying. Like, Max Chandler Mather blocked housing reform for a full year. His policy was explicitly to make the housing crisis worse. So as to cynically benefit from it. And the reason why I can say that Max Chandler Mather's policy was cynical is that he literally was NIMBY. He wanted to ban construction of new housing, but he also wanted infinity migration to increase demand. So his policy, Max Schindler-Mather's policy, was limit supply, increase demand, make the housing crisis worse. Therefore, I will benefit from it. That was Max Schindler-Mather's strategy. And then Braden's going, how dare he celebrate the defeat of the only person in Parliament who cared about renters? What a fucking joke. Max-State will become a property developer. I think it would be perfect, right? That would be a perfect thing for him to get into, right? Max Schindler-Mather. Let me get up I'm going to find the one where he was trying to block housing, the NIMBY one. So Max Schindler-Mather block new housing. It's so funny. I actually used to live near that development that he was protesting, and they tried to build basically what they tried to do is they were really cynical about this. They tried to build a community vegetable garden, and they tried to build it explicitly in the path of where the bulldozers would go to clear the path for this new development that would have 1,000, it would be enough for 1,000 people to be housed. And he knew that what he was doing. It was funny though, when it came time for the actual bulldozers to come in, they didn't even try and stop it. Because I think by that time, Max Schindler-Mather knew that he looked so cynical for being a NIMBY, at the same time trying to claim that he cared about the housing crisis. I remember the Lord Mayor for Brisbane candidate wanted to block high density housing because it was close to a pool and the pool wouldn't get sun for all hours of the day. Absolute joke of a party. Friendly Geordie's podcast just ended. Good to know. Tell Friendly Geordies I want to debate him. I'm going to find it. Max Schindler-Mather. I'm actually going to retweet this by Mark Bailey. Sad to see Max Schindler-Mather spinning his defeat on radio, saying his vote held up. It was the voting system and other people's fault. The truth is his party blocked housing for years. He had biggest swing against him of Queens and Greens federal MPs and lost nearly 3% of his vote as a result. Beautiful. I tried, but Ali didn't read my message. That's a shame. I hope we will get through to Geordies and we will have this big debate. This is a good tweet. I'm going to retweet it. I have to talk about this, right? I said this back in November, but it's still true. He was virtue signaling that he couldn't afford a house despite earning the $230,000 salary. And then he said, oh, well, I donate $50K a year to run free meal programs. But then he tries to make it out like he's the Black Panthers. And he was running meal programs at State High, which is a GPS school with selective entry. The GPS is kind of like the Brisbane equivalent. The GPS is like the Brisbane equivalent of having a mini Ivy League when it comes to high schools, right? It's one of the most elite schools in Brisbane. And you could still afford a house with your remaining $170K salary, especially in light of the $50K tax deduction for running meal programs in one of the wealthiest suburbs in the country. So, yeah, dude, what a joke. Hey, he was running it at Brisbane State High, which is Brisbane State High is technically a public school, but it's basically a private school because it's one of the most elite schools in Brisbane. So unless you live in the catchment area, and the catchment area is one of the richest parts of Brisbane, the catchment area is literally really hot. The local house prices in the catchment area would be $3 to $4 million, right? So unless you get into the catchment area because your parents own a really, really expensive house nearby, or you get in on selective entry. And Max Schindler-Mather was going I'm the Black Panthers. I'm running the free meals program at one of the richest schools in Australia. Sorry if you covered this already. How do you think Albanese's policy is with the CCP? Unfortunately, it's a pretty bad policy. He had a mantra that he would repeat constantly over and over and over again. And the mantra was always the same. We will disagree where we can and we will agree where we can, disagree where we must. And essentially that was his way of saying, oh yeah, listen, we don't like the human rights abuses, but we will try to find areas of common ground. And it's really a cop-out, basically, because essentially over the past 3 years, there basically was not a single time, I think, where Anthony Albanese very vocally ever came out and actually criticized the Chinese government. Brisbane State High is not elite. I know a couple of idiots that graduated from there. I mean, there's idiots from all schools, right? But it is, at the end of the day, one of the best schools in Brisbane. It's part of the group of publics. It's part of the GPS, which is elite schools. It's selective entry, so you have to get in on a talent. Otherwise, it's the catchment area. The catchment area is one of the richest areas in all of Brisbane. What do you think of the new Syrian president? Look, it's a sad thing. I really wish that Jelani would have followed up the promise where he was talking about, trying to build up state institutions, moving away from radicalism, moving away from jihadism. But obviously, there have been pogroms against ethnic minorities in Syria under his government. And whether that's him personally or his underlings that he cannot control, it is obviously a really dire situation now. And it's a real shame, because there was a promise there, and I really wish that I really still hope, I hold out hope somehow that there can be some kind of moderate government there, because what we saw with Assad was so brutal. And I think almost anything is better than Assad, because he killed more than 500,000 people. Drew, when we graduate, I'm graduating my Bachelor of Arts at the end of this year. LP was 2,000 votes ahead this morning. It's now 4,000 votes ahead in Melbourne. I think he's probably gone in Melbourne. Drew, talk about your experience with the KIP. I have talked about it before, but essentially, I was good friends with Bob. We worked very closely together. When I was getting expelled from the University of Queensland, I was asked to... when I was getting expelled from the University of Queensland, he came in, helped me out. We were on TV together. We ran a campaign against the universities trying to expel me for protesting against the Chinese government. We were a really good team together. And then we were talking, and it came up, the opportunity that I might run for them at the Senate level in Queensland in 2022. And I think it would have been a really interesting campaign, because he has a lot of support among young people, basically that meme factor. And he also still has a real name for himself based in North Queensland and stuff. And I thought this could potentially be this really weird, interesting dynamic where you basically got a fusion of agrarian socialism and sort of like populism that can connect with young people. And I thought there was a lot of opportunity there. And, talking to him, he once said to me, like, I would have voted for Bernie Sanders in America if it wasn't for his stance on abortion. Like, when it came to economics, he had very left-leaning views. He's a member of the CFMU, he's a member of the unions. So there was a chance there. And I think it was really his son, Robbie. Wait, I thought you hated socialists. Look, I think Bernie Sanders is more of a social democrat than an actual outright socialist. I think as a social democrat, he's okay necessarily. Just because you're a GPS doesn't mean anything. I mean, look, when it comes to Bernie Sanders, at least he's not a tanky, right? That's the big marker in the sand. And that's why, for example, I hate Jordan van der Lem and the Victorian socialists. Like, people saying, oh, Drew hates them because they advocate, policies to help poor people. That's not why. I hate them because they're like basically pro-China, they're pro-Russia, they're all tankies, they love Hamas. They're advocating squatting, they're advocating terrorist violence. I mean, Jordan van der Lem literally ran a campaign message around Trotsky and acts of individual violence and how they can help the left, like in the case of so-called, he was referencing Luigi Mangione and saying, oh, this is so good for the left. So I think that's why, for example, I really just dislike Jordan van der Lem. It's not because he's helping the poor. He doesn't help the poor. Instead, he's like an extremist who wants violence. Cannabis legislation thoughts. I mean, sure, just legalize medical marijuana. At the end of the day, I personally don't like marijuana. I mean, I think I tried it once and I didn't like it at all. I hate drinking, I hate drugs and stuff like that. I like to be in control, right? I've known some people who've used marijuana too much and it has ruined their lives. I think it's based. You're asking me about recreation. Listen, I don't think recreation should be criminalized. Maybe it should be legalized. Take it away from the black market, etc., and gangsters. That said, though, I think heavy usage of it recreationally will fuck people up, and so I just caution. Just talk, like we're setting aside politics for a second, right? Just as a young bloke talking to other young blokes, I would caution people against, heavy usage of marijuana recreationally, because it's bad. Hang on, someone changed my Wikipedia page apparently. Let me see. They cooked me. No, I think that's a fine photo. That's okay. What's your Discord? My Discord, I will post the Discord in the YouTube comments. I might end the stream soon, guys. It was a really good stream with Leo and everything. Max-Snape will be hitting the bongs. I hope not. I mean, he's still got kids. He's got a kid to look after. I hope he doesn't hit the bong after this election loss. So guys, I've just commented the Discord link on my YouTube comments. If you're watching on Twitter, you can go to my YouTube and you can find in the comments the link to join my Discord. And it is a public Discord. I'm only removing people if they've got extremist ideology and stuff like that. I'm happy to have left wing. I'm happy to have people who are socialists. I'm happy to have people who are right wing, but when I won't have extremists in there, right? So that's the line. But I mean, I'm happy to have, you know, a range of viewpoint diversity, but yeah, just not like it's just basic moderating rules. No extremism, no slurs, all that sort of shit. Maybe Greens members could replicate the BPP tactic of following police patrols while being armed. Yeah, I actually, mate, that's so true. I think the Greens would do really well if they replicated like Black Panther style tactics, like just getting guns out and just following the police. Let me get up an image of that. Black Panther patrols. Now, Max Chandler Mather certainly seemed to have thought that he was Black Panther because he was running free meal programs at one of the richest schools in Brisbane, in one of the richest electorates in the country. But look, I think they would gain a lot of support if they started following the police around with guns, and obviously not in an illegal fashion, just you know, making sure the police are doing their job. I think the Australian public would really, really support that. I think the Australian public would love to see that happen. I think actually what Max Chandler Mather should do in order to win the seat of Griffith at the next election, what Max should do is he should start walking around West End and maybe just start carrying a shotgun with him. Just start carrying a shotgun, wear a beret, you know, a Black Panther logo, wear a beret, have a shotgun, and just walk around the streets of West End. And if he sees one of those copper dogs, just start shadowing them and just say, like, you know, I'm making sure that you're keeping the community safe. I'm making sure you're not engaging in racist violence. So we're organizing our own Green Black Panther patrols with shotguns. I reckon if Max Chandler Mather started walking around West End with a shotgun, there's a strong likelihood he could come back at the next election, probably with a commanding majority in the seat of Griffith. So that would be that's probably my best electoral advice to Max Chandler Mather would be, the Greens party like the Black Panthers and start sort of having police patrols in inner city areas of Brisbane, like West End. Maybe just walk down Boundary Street in West End. You know, there's a lot of luxury shops there these days, but just start walking around with a shotgun. I think people would appreciate that. Do you talk about anyone else or just Max? I mean, look, Max is probably my favorite Greens MP, and it's a real shame, and I'm shattered that he's been defeated. And so my main recommendation to him would be to come back at the next election, just after 3 years of walking around West End with a shotgun, just a Black Panther patrol. Isn't it a bit ironic to talk about someone else being electable? Not really, because I ran at 21. Like, I ran at the age of 21. Who fucking cares? If you run at the age of 21, no one expects you to win. Like, dude, do you think it's a little bit different? Max Chandler Mather was a member of the parliament. He had a campaign that had hundreds of thousands of dollars behind him. He had hundreds of volunteers, and he lost. Whereas I was like 21 years old that ran. So different. Bring back the Democratic Alliance, please. Well said. Very well said. I know that people are crying out for this all across the country. So true. I think if the Drew Public Democratic Alliance had run at this election, we would have probably won 80 to 90 seats. And I think that's a lot of people would say that. Senator Faruqi says the Greens are racist. Does this explain why Max-Snape lost? Very well said. Very well said. I think Max Chandler Mather was a very racist individual. And I think that would explain probably why he lost. I think he had a lot of hatred in his heart, towards like Jewish people and white Australians, a lot of white guilt on his part potentially, and that could explain why he lost, why his primary vote went backwards. It was the biggest swing against him of any of the Greens federal MPs in Brisbane. By the way, what are your thoughts on the progressive caucus known as Fusion? They've been infiltrated by DLP caucus now too, and the de facto leader thinks robots should have the same rights as humans. Look, I don't really pay attention to Fusion for that exact reason, because Fusion is kind of made up of, you know, Fusion is like an alliance of really small parties, and some of them are really weird guys, like sort of left-wing cookers. Why did you accept donations from far-right personality Simon Fenwick? Who cares that I received a donation from Simon Fenwick? I used that donation to campaign against the Liberal MP Gladys Liu. I helped to unseat a Liberal MP, Gladys Liu. Simon Fenwick knew that I was anti-Trump. Simon Fenwick knew that my overall position is moderate left. He knew that I still vote Labor at the end of the day. He still donated to me. And if you go, oh, Drew's views have changed so much, I voted for Labor at this election. I'm a strong opponent of Trump. Like the only area where people try to say, "Oh, Drew's far right," is Israel Palestine. And at the end of the day, my views are actually very moderate. I just literally support a two-state solution. It's just that I hate Hamas. It's so fucking funny because I get people go, "Oh, Simon Fenwick paid Drew Pavlu to become a Zionist, a right-wing Zionist." Like no, it's actually really obvious. The reason I became so stridently anti-Hamas was because I watched October 7 happen. I watched a horrible massacre of random civilians. I saw a horrible massacre of civilians. I watched the footage of Hamas fighters. They had GoPros on themselves, and they went through people's homes and just shot people in the head and killed all these people. They shot dogs dead. At the music festival that they massacred, they killed a woman with cerebral palsy, like a disabled woman. And then I saw all these lefties, the tankies that I already hated because they were pro-China and pro-Russia, all these guys came out and they started going, "This is the greatest day in history. This is the greatest revolution in history. This is what decolonization looks like." And then I just said, okay, straight up, I'm against fucking Hamas. That's why my views changed on the Israel-Palestine issue, because of October 7. Simon Fenwick donated to me in like March 2022. And then October 7, I didn't even talk about Israel-Palestine until after October 7, 2 years later almost. And it was because I watched the massacre happen, and then I watched people who I thought were my friends. I was shattered by the fact that I had friends who suddenly were supporting Hamas, people I thought were my friends. That has a big impact on you, right? That had a big impact on me. I had friends who I thought were normal people, and suddenly they were posting on the Instagram stories, "This is the greatest day in history," when I had seen just bodies of elderly Jewish grandmothers piled at a bus stop that Hamas had just shot up. Do you think I'm a normal human being? I don't agree with fucking massacres. I don't agree with people going to a music festival filled with teenagers and slaughtering the entire music festival. I don't like fucking terrorism. I don't like Islamic terrorism. It's so amazing to me. It's so funny to think that the only reason possible that I might dislike Islamic terrorism is because someone paid me to dislike it. No, I have my own fucking brain. I've watched people celebrate October 7 and I was sickened by it. Or Simon Fenwick paid Drew Pavlu to not like a massacre of teenagers at a music festival. Are you cunts fucking for real? You're fucking stupid. Max-Snape is far right in that he's pro-Hamas and a selfish NIMBY. So well said, Mr. Landy. I'm moderate left, takes far right money. Okay, dude, I took money from a Liberal donor and I campaigned against Gladys Liu, a Liberal MP who had been pro-CCP. Like, what has changed here? What does that do to me, right? The only argument that people have about, oh, Drew became right wing because of Simon Fenwick. No, my views naturally became more conservative because I watched other young left wing people that I knew from university, people I thought were my friends. I watched them celebrate a massacre, a terrorist massacre on October 7, the worst single day massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. I watched these people celebrate that. I said, that's disgusting to me. I didn't need Simon Fenwick to fucking donate to me to think, oh, fucking massacres of teenagers are bad. It's such a cope. It's such a cope. It's so fucking stupid. Question. I see you often advocate for deportation in the UK context, for example, but the vast majority of the grooming gang members are second generation with no other citizenship. I'm sorry, but I think if you're a second generation migrant and you engage in rape gangs, I think you should be deported. I'm sorry. I think you should be deported. I don't see what you're contributing to the country because it's a choice. If you've migrated, it's a choice. It's a choice. It's ultimately a choice for British people whether they want migrants, right? And did people in Britain vote that they wanted to have rape gangs? No. If you are a migrant or a second generation migrant and you've engaged in a heinous crime against humanity, sorry, I think you should be deported, your citizenship cancelled. Because I don't think for like 1 second, do you guys really think Anjem Choudhury, like the ISIS preacher in Britain, do you really think he's just as pommy, just as British as the fucking Queen? Do you really think he's just as British, just as patriotic as fucking King Charles? Of course not. Like, these people hate the country. If it's very simple, right? 2 things. 1, if you hate the country. 2, if you're engaging in heinous crimes against humanity, deportation. So to be a member of parliament, do you have to go around promoting yourself to people? You can't be introverted and a member of parliament, yet Albanese is a better male. Well, you have to run a really strong local campaign. Each MP has about 150,000 electors, and they have to run a very strong grassroots campaign to try and reach those people. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to do. You need to have basically a huge machine behind you. You have to have a lot of money behind you. Big impact on me. What about the children being slaughtered in Gaza? Do you think the idea of murdering children had a big impact on Palestinians? Listen here, mate. Hamas could have any time over the past 2 years surrendered. Why is it that Hamas has never surrendered. People call this a genocide. It's a very strange genocide where apparently the party being genocided has the opportunity at any moment over the past 2 years to simply end it all by surrendering. It's a war between Hamas and the IDF. Hamas refuses to surrender. Hamas continues to fight. Hamas has said over and over and over again that they believe in the apocalyptic race war destruction of Israel. They said that as long as they're empowering Gaza, they will always seek the apocalyptic race war destruction of Israel. So what do you think is going to happen? It's ultimately Hamas's fault. I blame Hamas for the horrible suffering. There's been a lot of horrible suffering in Gaza. I hate that. I wish no civilian was harmed. I ultimately blame Hamas because they've started this war and they've kept it going. Pretending the Israeli army and Hamas are moral equivalents can only be explained by anti-Semitism. Well said, Mr. Landu. Too much Qatar money going into Islamism. Do you endorse the illegal settlers in the West Bank? I don't endorse illegal settlements in the West Bank. As I said previously, what I support is a two-state solution. Yusuf, follow me back on X. I will actually, Yusuf Dumphy. I'll do that. I will do that. Because I've appreciated your contributions the past couple of days. You've made some great comments. Yusuf Dumphy 98. I'll find you, Yusuf, and I'll follow you. Okay, I think I've found Yusuf's profile. I'll add Yusuf. Yeah, got you, Yusuf. Exactly. It's not left-wing to support an ultra-right-wing, misogynistic, homophobic terrorist group. They are Nazis without the black leather uniforms. They're literally a Nazi group. Their ideology is the genocide of Jews. Do you condemn the murder of children and elderly in Gaza? I am so sickened and saddened by the death of any innocent person in Gaza. I wish the war was not happening. Unfortunately, Hamas started the war and kept the war going. So the moral blame has to be with Hamas. Reckon Barnaby should coup the Nats and strong arm the libs into serfdom. Long live Duke Barnaby of the Duchy of New England. Well said, Snazzy Scotsman. Do you want to debate the possibility of deporting second-generation citizens? Look, this is just the question, right? Why is it okay, say you're born in Britain. You've lived there for 25 years, but you hate the country, you've never integrated, you don't assimilate, and you rape people. How are you part of the country at that point? Just being born there isn't enough. You have to actually become part of the society. You have to integrate. If you refuse to integrate and you're carrying out heinous race war motivated crimes against the native population, then you have to be deported. Because this is an underrated thing that we have to discuss when it comes to those grooming gang incidents. A lot of the key perpetrators in that horrible, a lot of the key perpetrators in this horrible atrocity outright said that they hated white people and all this sort of stuff. They actually made comments that indicated that their horrible crimes were racially motivated. And so if you are a migrant and you're carrying out racially motivated crimes, I'm sorry, see ya, you're out of there. I'm sorry. What functional country can accept migrants coming in and then engaging in race war behavior? Either you have to respect the country, you have to respect the laws of the country. If you want to integrate, if you're a Muslim person in Britain and you actually sincerely want to integrate into Britain and you follow the laws and you love Britain, I've got no problem with you whatsoever. My problem is not against anybody on an individual basis. My problem is with extremists and my problem is with criminals. Israel is the most successful indigenous rights project in the history of the world. Racists hate it. So well said, Mr. Landier. We need a Sigma male as PM. Albanese is quite personable in real life. Yeah, look, this is the funny thing. A lot of these politicians that might not come off as personable on TV, a lot of the time they actually are a lot more personable in real life. A good example of that is Bill Shorten. I've met with Bill Shorten. In person, he's a very charismatic figure. But for some reason, the media was always against him and it was hard for that to translate onto the television. I think a lot of people in Australian politics talk about that. Do you endorse the settlements in the West Bank? No, I don't. Anjem Choudhury's gang should be deported to Taliban's Afghanistan. Well said. Mother should follow the example of lost my end stream. Thank you for the donation, bro. Thank you. I appreciate it. Reckon Barnaby should coup the Nats. I agree with you, Snazzy Snelson. Please give to Max-Snape retirement fund. Thank you for the $2 donation, Andrew. Braden replied to you. Okay, before I end the stream, I'm going to quickly look at Braden's comment because that's pretty funny. Okay. Tool House today is pretty good. We had a pretty good viewership. It is growing slowly. We're growing slowly. It's great to have Leo on the stream. Let's see. Every time I get a Drew Pavlik quote tweet, I feel like I need to give some snarky comeback, but this one's so tight and derivative, I can't even muster anything, not even as infuriating as the average Rusty. That's just shit. That's just shit. I'm sorry, Brandon. That's a shit response. That's weak. That's shit. It's true. It's ultimately true that Max Chandler Mather wanted to exploit the housing crisis to his own gain. That's why he was a NIMBY. That's why he advocated massive increase in demand while restricting supply. It's very factual. Drew, you didn't say you condemn the killing of... I condemn the killing of any innocent, okay? I condemn the killing of any Palestinian innocent. I don't want to see innocents ever harmed. The problem is that Hamas is the main party at fault here. They're morally responsible for the deaths in Gaza because they've kept the war going. They could have ended it, but they keep it going. But they are legally not migrants. They are born citizens. You provide reason for why you would want them deported, not for how it is possible. Just simply say that if you're a second-generation migrant and you rape somebody, you get deported. Just literally pass the law. That's what you can do in Britain. You can do that in Britain because Britain's constitution is based on parliamentary sovereignty. That means that a simple majority in the House of Commons and passage through the House of Lords, you can pass the law. So it's very simple. I think even if you're a born citizen, if you're a second-generation migrant and you rape somebody and you hate the country and you rape somebody, you're deported. Just simple. And honestly, like I think the majority of people would agree with me on that. Tony Abbott is surprisingly a top lad in real life. I've heard that as well. I've heard that he's a lot more charismatic in person. And look, good on him because he did firefighting and stuff like that. He's actually made a lot of contributions outside of politics. Respect to him for that. If you're moderate Labour, then why is half of your chat right-wing populist? Dude, half these people say that I should be deported. The chat doesn't reflect anything on me. Everyone who cares about living in a functional Western society also cares about the rule of law and the legal possibilities permitted within that framework. But we will still have the rule of law. We will just say within the framework of the rule of law, there's been law passed through Parliament, duly enacted, and just say simple, if you're the child of a first-generation migrant and you rape somebody, you get deported. It's not true that you can deport them by just passing a law because there needs to be a recipient country. Just do it. Just, I don't know, pay a country to take them in. There will be countries that you can pay to take them in. I heard Malcolm Turnbull was very posh in real life. I've never met him. The Islamic Republic dictatorship in Iran should definitely be overthrown. I'm Levy Goofy. So do we deport you to Greece or Cyprus? I'm not getting deported because I'm fully patriotic and I love the country. Why would I be deported? I don't know, guys. I might end it here unless there's any last-minute comments. But look, it's been a good stream today. I've had fun. Where are you supposed to deport people who don't have citizenship anywhere else? They will be stateless. Let me just be clear, right? I'm not talking about innocent people here. I'm not talking about just like the average migrant. I'm talking only about people who've committed either rape or murder, like the most extreme crimes. And I just don't think it's really important that their citizenship be maintained if they've carried out such heinous crimes against the entire population. End the stream, Drew. You're getting trolled right now. I've given you $4 to end the stream. Thank you, Losma. I appreciate it. Anyway, guys, I probably will end it here. Thank you, everybody who's been watching. Do you like Ben-Gvir? I hate Ben-Gvir. And if you look at my tweets, I've condemned Ben-Gvir on literally hundreds of occasions. But anyway, I'm ending the stream now, guys. Thank you for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you're on Twitter, go to my YouTube, like and subscribe. We're trying to build it up. I really appreciate anybody who's been watching. Thanks, guys, who have watched the whole 2 hours. And day 23 in our 100-day challenge. We're 23% of the way there. It's actually doing pretty well. I'm actually starting to like streaming. It's going good. So I appreciate your support, guys. If you're watching, please like and subscribe on YouTube. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you. Have a good night. Thank you, everybody.